I'm writing this because the officer said it might help to just get it all down in one place, even if parts of it don't line up right. I'm Rachel Moore. I'm 19. I'm in a practical nursing program at Norwalk Community College, and I do babysitting on the side because my financial aid is always late. That's not really important, except I'm used to being in other people's houses and I don't usually get weird about it. This was in Westport, Connecticut on Bayberry Lane, which you can look up. It's one of those streets where every mailbox looks the same and the lawns are so even they look fake, like you could peel them up and roll them away. It was late March, still cold enough that my car heater took forever to warm up, but no snow on the ground anymore, just that damp smell like the earth is waking up. I got the job through care.com. The profile said Patterson family, 2 children, ages 6 and 8. There was a profile picture of a woman with straight brown hair and a white kitchen behind her. No red flags. I've done 20 of these jobs since last fall. Mrs. Patterson messaged me first. Hey Rachel, we need someone tonight 5 to 10 p.m. Is that okay? I said yes. She sent the address, instructions about dinner, already prepared, just heat, bedtime at 8:30, TV allowed but no tablets after 7. Pretty normal. I remember checking my phone battery before I left, 78%, because I hate when it dips below 20 and I'm stuck somewhere unfamiliar. The house was bigger than I expected. Colonial style, white with black shutters, 2 chimneys, the whole thing. There was a circular driveway and a little stone wall near the mailbox with the number on a bronze plaque. It looked staged. Not staged like for sale, just like every detail had been thought about too much. Mrs. Patterson met me at the door. She was exactly like her profile photo, which weirdly reassured me. People don't always look like their pictures. She was in a rush.
Rachel.
Sorry, we're already late. The kids are finishing homework in the dining room. Dinner's in the fridge. Just follow the note on the counter. Okay? Sure, yeah, no problem. Her husband, at least I assumed, was behind her, grabbing keys, saying something about traffic on I-95. He nodded at me but didn't stop. I stepped inside and it was warm in that dry, expensive way. Not like a heater blasting, just evenly warm. The floors were dark wood. No scratches, no dust anywhere. There was a smell like citrus cleaner, but faint. The kids are great, she said, already halfway out the door. They're very easy. I've got it, I said, and then they were gone. I heard the front door close, the car start, tires on gravel. I locked the door behind them because that's what I always do, and then I stood there for a second, just taking in the quiet. Not quiet exactly. There was a clock somewhere, ticking, and a low hum like from a refrigerator or something in the walls. I called. No answer. I followed the light into the dining room. 2 kids were sitting at the table, back straight, papers in front of them. A boy and a girl, I think. They looked up at the same time. Hi, I said again, smiling. Hi, Rachel, they both said. That was normal enough. Parents usually tell kids the babysitter's name. I'm just gonna check your homework and then we'll do dinner. Okay? They nodded. I sat across from them and glanced at their papers. Math worksheets, basic stuff. Addition, some word problems. Everything was already filled in. Looks like you guys are done, I said. We are, the girl said. They spoke very clearly. Not robotic or anything, just precise. Cool. Then let's get dinner going. I went into the kitchen. It was huge, all white cabinets and marble counters. There was a note exactly where she said it would be. Rachel, chicken in the glass dish, 20 minutes at 350. Green beans already cooked. Juice in fridge. Thank you. The handwriting was neat, almost printed. I checked the oven clock, 5:12 p.m. I put the chicken in, set a timer on my phone too because I don't trust ovens. 20 minutes. I opened Instagram for a second, scrolled, nothing interesting. My phone dropped to 73%. When I came back to the dining room, the kids were still sitting exactly how I left them. Do you want to watch something while we wait? I asked. No, the boy said. We like to sit. Okay, I said, laughing a little because I thought he was joking. They didn't laugh. I sat down again. So, what are your names? Evan, the boy said. Clara, the girl said. Nice to meet you guys. Nice to meet you, they said at the same time. That's when I noticed the blinking. It wasn't dramatic. I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't sitting right there looking at both of them. They blinked together, exactly together, not just close, exact, like someone pressed a button. I thought, okay, siblings do weird mirror stuff sometimes. I have a younger cousin who copies everything his brother does. It didn't freak me out, not then. It just stuck in my head. I checked my phone. 6:01 p.m. That didn't make sense because the timer should have gone off already. I opened the timer app. It still said 14:32 remaining. Did I set that wrong? I said out loud. Neither of them answered. I went back into the kitchen and looked at the oven. The display still said 350, no timer running. I swear I said it. I always double check. Okay, whatever, I muttered, resetting it. I noticed my phone battery was at 68% now. Felt like it dropped faster than usual, but I had been using it. When I came back, they were still there. Same posture, same papers. I don't think they'd moved at all. Do you guys ever, get bored? I asked. No, Clara said. We have everything we need, Evan added. Okay. I sat down again, and this time I couldn't not watch their faces. I tried to catch them blinking at different times, but it never happened. Every single blink together. I even looked away and then back, thinking maybe I was just syncing it in my head. But no, I texted my friend Jess. These kids blink at the same time, LOL. She replied like a minute later. That's creepy, stop. LOL, I know, right? I didn't say anything else because it felt dumb to make a big deal out of blinking. Dinner eventually finished. I don't remember hearing the timer go off, but when I checked, the chicken was done. That part is fuzzy, sorry. I plated everything, brought it to the table. They ate neatly. No talking, just chewing, swallowing, blink, blink, together. You guys can watch TV after this, I said, mostly to fill the silence. We prefer not to, Evan said. Okay, what do you want to do then? We like when you talk, Clara said. About what? Anything. So I started talking about school. My clinical rotation, how I'm not great with early mornings, how one of my instructors is kind of intense but in a good way. Just normal stuff. They watched me the whole time. Not in a creepy way, just very focused. Blink, blink. At some point, I realized I was rambling and stopped. Sorry, I'm talking too much. It's fine, they said together. After dinner, I told them to go brush their teeth. They stood up at the same time, walked out at the same pace. I heard them in the bathroom, water running, then off, then running again. It was all very coordinated. I cleaned up. The kitchen went back to looking like no one had used it. I'm pretty good about that. My mom drilled it into me. When I opened one of the cabinets to put a plate away, it didn't go as far back as it should have. Like it hit something. Did they put something back here? I said, half to myself. I pushed the stack of plates aside and saw a thin gap behind them. There was a photograph wedged back there. I pulled it out. It was a family photo. Same kitchen, same lighting. Mrs. Patterson, the man I assumed was her husband, and 2 kids. But not these kids. These kids had darker hair, different faces, like completely different people. The girl in the photo had a gap in her teeth. The boy had freckles. I stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it. Evan, I called. Clara? No answer. I put the photo on the counter and walked toward the bathroom. The door was open. The sink was dry. Guys, no one. I checked the living room. Empty. My stomach did this weird drop thing, like when you miss a step. Okay, not funny, I said, even though they hadn't seemed like the type to hide as a joke. I checked the hallway, a small office, a den. Nothing. Then I heard chairs scraping in the dining room. I turned back and they were sitting there again, exactly where they had been for dinner. I swear I didn't hear them come back in. Oh, I said. There you are. They looked at me. Did you brush your teeth? Yes, they said. I glanced at their mouths. Clean, I guess. I didn't get close enough to really check. Okay. Bedtime in 15 minutes. I went back to the kitchen and picked up the photo again. I looked closer this time. There was a date printed on the bottom corner, 2019. I took a picture of it with my phone. The camera app lagged a little, which was weird because it's a newer phone, but it saved. My battery was at 61%. I decided to just text Mrs. Patterson and ask, casually, "Hi, just quick question, are these the kids in the photo in the kitchen?" I attached the picture. No response. I waited a minute, then another. My phone showed 1 bar of service, then 2, then none, then back to 1. Westport usually has good coverage, so that was annoying. I went back to the dining room. "Hey, who are the kids in this photo?" I asked, holding it up. They both looked at it. "That's us," Clara said. "That doesn't look like you," I said, before I could stop myself. They blinked. "It is us," Evan said. "Okay," I said slowly. "Maybe it's just an older picture." "It is," they said. I didn't argue. I didn't know what the argument would even be. "All right, bedtime," I said, clapping my hands once. They stood up. Again, perfectly together. I followed them upstairs. The hallway was lined with framed photos. Landscapes, abstract art, a few family pictures. In those, the kids looked like the ones in the cabinet photo, not like the ones walking in front of me. I almost said something, then didn't. Their bedroom was at the end of the hall. 2 twin beds, identical bedding, a bookshelf, a nightstand between them. "Okay, get in," I said. They got into bed at the same time, pulled the covers up at the same time, turned their heads toward me at the same angle. "Do you want a story?" I asked. "No," they said. "All right, good night then." "Good night, Rachel." I turned off the light and closed the door most of the way, leaving it cracked. Standard. When I got back downstairs, I checked my phone again. 7:48 p.m. Battery 52%. Still no reply from Mrs. Patterson. I decided to call her. It rang twice. "Hello?" she said. "Hi, Mrs. Patterson. It's Rachel." Pause. "I'm sorry, who?" "Rachel, the babysitter? I'm at your house with." "I think you have the wrong number," she said. "No, this is the number from care.com. I don't have children," she said, cutting me off. "And I didn't hire anyone." I laughed because what else do you do? I'm literally in your house right now. You left like 2 hours ago." "No," she said, sharper now. "I'm at home, alone." I looked around the living room. Everything was exactly as it had been. "I think there's some confusion," I said. "Yes," she said. "There is." And then the call cut out. I stared at my phone. No service. "Okay," I said to no one. I tried to open care.com. The app wouldn't load. Just a spinning circle. I went to my messages with her. They were still there, but when I tapped on her profile, it said user not found. "Crap," I muttered. I checked my battery. 47%. I decided I was just going to leave. Something was wrong and I didn't need to figure out what. I grabbed my bag, went to the front door, unlocked it, opened it. The living room, not the porch, not the driveway, the living room. I stood there, holding the doorknob, looking at the couch I had just been sitting on. "Okay," I said again, but it came out quieter. I closed the door, opened it again. Same thing. I went to the back door, opened it. Living room. I tried the door from the kitchen to the garage. Same. I started to feel, not panicky exactly, but like my thoughts were slipping a little, like I couldn't hold on to one long enough to finish it. I checked my phone again. 39%. I opened maps. It showed my location as a blank gray area. No streets, just a dot. "Cool," I said, because sarcasm is my default. I went upstairs, faster this time. The kids were still in bed. Eyes open. "Hey," I said, "can you come downstairs with me for a second?" "We're already downstairs," they said. "No, you're not, you're right here." They blinked. "We're downstairs," Clara repeated. I rubbed my eyes.
Okay, no.
"No, listen, I need you to get up." "We are up," Evan said. I took a step back. My head felt wrong, like I had a headache but without pain. "I'm going to call your mom again," I said. "You don't need to," they said.
Ido.
"You don't." Their voices were still calm. That almost made it worse. I went into the hallway and leaned against the wall. I could hear the clock downstairs, ticking, even from up here. Or maybe it was a different clock. I tried my phone again. 33%. I Googled because that's what you do when something doesn't make sense. I typed, "Seeing same place through different doors house confusion kids, different blinking same time." The results were all over the place. One thing that came up was, temporal lobe seizures can cause derealization and time distortion. I clicked it. It talked about how people can feel like environments are repeating, or that things aren't real, or that they're observing rather than participating. It mentioned something called jamais vu, where familiar things feel unfamiliar. "That's it," I said out loud. "I'm just stressed. I have been stressed. Midterms, money, my car making that weird noise I keep ignoring." It made sense, kind of, except the part where doors didn't lead outside. I laughed, but it sounded thin. "Okay, Rachel, you're fine," I said. "You're just tired." I went into the bathroom to splash water on my face. The mirror was above the sink. I looked up, and for a second, just a second, I didn't recognize the person looking back. Not like, "Oh, I look different today." I mean, I genuinely had to think, who is that? She looked like me. Same hair, same sweatshirt, but her eyes were off. Not physically different, just not matching what I was doing. I blinked. She blinked a fraction later. I froze. No, not froze, I just stopped moving because moving felt like it would mess something up. "Okay," I whispered. I raised my hand slowly. She raised hers, but there was a lag. Tiny, but there. "Stop," I said, and I don't know why I said it. She didn't. I stepped back so fast I hit the door. "Nope," I said. Nope. I left the bathroom, pulled the door shut harder than I meant to. I stood in the hallway, breathing a little too fast, trying to get my thoughts back into order. "This is a medical thing," I said. "It has to be." I went back to the kids' room. The beds were empty. "Okay," I said louder now. "Guys, this isn't funny." I heard them downstairs. Chairs scraping again. I kind of half ran down the stairs. They were at the dining table, sitting exactly like before, like they had never gone to bed at all. "We told you," Clara said. "We're downstairs." I gripped the back of a chair. "What time is it?" "Time to sit," Evan said. "No, what time is it?" They didn't answer. I checked my phone. 21%. The time said 6:03 p.m. "That's not right," I said. "It was almost 8. "It's 6:03, they said. I laughed again, a short, sharp sound. "Okay, sure." I sat down because my legs felt like they might not cooperate if I stayed standing. We sat there. Blink, blink. I don't know how long. At some point, I stopped trying to check the time. My phone was at 15%, then 12%, then 9%. It felt like the numbers were dropping faster when I looked at them. I tried to remember what I was supposed to be doing. Babysitting. Dinner, check. Bedtime. I had done that, I think. Or I was about to. "Rachel," Clara said. "Yeah. You've always been here." "No," I said immediately. "I got here at 5. "You've always been here," Evan repeated. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. Because a small part of my brain, the part that had been reading about seizures and memory glitches, went, "Are you sure?" I tried to picture myself arriving. The driveway, the door, Mrs. Patterson's face. It was there, but it felt thinner than it should have, like a memory of a memory. "That's not true," I said, but quieter. They didn't push it. We just sat. At some point, I got up and started cleaning again. The same plates, the same counters, like I was looping through the same tasks. I found myself wiping a spot that was already clean, then doing it again because I couldn't remember if I had. My phone died. 0%. The screen went black. "Great," I said. The house stayed evenly lit, no matter what time it was supposed to be. The windows showed a kind of gray-blue that didn't change. I went back to the bathroom once more because I felt like I had to check. The mirror. This time, the person looked more like me, more aligned. When I blinked, she blinked at the same time. "Okay," I said, almost relieved. Then she didn't look relieved. Her face stayed neutral even as I felt something like relief. I reached up and touched my cheek. She did the same, but her expression didn't match mine. I backed away slowly. "I'm just tired," I said again, but it sounded like I was repeating a line from a script. I don't remember going back downstairs. I don't remember sitting on the couch. I remember the sound of the front door opening. Morning light, actual morning light, pale and a little too bright. "Hello?" A woman's voice called. "Mrs. Patterson." I stood up automatically. "Oh, hi," I said. "You're back." She stepped into the living room, looking around like she was checking for something out of place. Everything was perfect, cleaner than when I arrived. She looked at me. "Who are you?" she asked. I smiled because that's what you do. "I'm Rachel," I said. "I've been here." "For what?" she said. "To watch the kids." She stared at me. "I don't have children," she said. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out at first. Then, "Oh, sorry. I must have the wrong house." "That would be difficult," she said slowly. "This is my house." I nodded. "Right?"
Yeah. Sorry.
I picked up my bag. It felt light, like there wasn't much in it, but I didn't check. "Have a good day," I said. "You too," she said, still watching me. I walked to the front door. This time, when I opened it, it was the porch. The driveway, my car. The air outside was cold and real and a little damp. I got in my car, sat there for a second, then started it. My phone turned on after a minute, like it had just been off. Not dead. 82%. I checked the time.
9:14 a.m.
I checked my messages. The conversation with Mrs. Patterson wasn't there. I checked my photos. No picture of the family photo. I sat there, hands on the wheel, trying to line everything up. I still can't completely. There are gaps. Places where I know something happened, but I can't grab it. I did go to a clinic later just to be safe. I told them about the confusion, the time issues. They mentioned something called transient global amnesia and also temporal lobe stuff like I read. They said stress can do weird things. That explains some of it. It doesn't explain why, when I got home and looked in my bathroom mirror, I had to wait a second before I was sure the person looking back was me. And even then, I'm not fully sure. Okay, so I've been trying to figure out how to write this out for like 3 weeks now, and every time I start typing, I end up just closing the laptop and gonna do something else because putting it into words makes it feel more real again. My wife keeps saying just write it down, you'll feel better. And she's probably right, but she also wasn't there, so she doesn't fully get why writing it down isn't as simple as it sounds. But here I am, Tuesday night. She's asleep. I've got maybe 3 hours before I need to try to sleep myself, and I figure if I don't do this now, I never will. My name is Dennis. I'm 52 years old and I worked, technically. I'm on extended leave right now, as night shift supervisor at a paper mill in Vernonia, Oregon. If you don't know Vernonia, that's fine, most people don't. It's a small town in Columbia County, about 45 miles northwest of Portland, sits right in the middle of Coast Range timber country. Population around 2,200, one main street, a Dollar General, a gas station that's also a deli, and an enormous mill that has been the economic center of that community in various forms since the early 1900s. The current operation is under different ownership than the original, changed hands a few times over the decades, but the building itself, the main production floor, the pulping building, the northeast corridor connecting them, that structure goes back further than most people realize. Some of those walls are original masonry from 1914. I know because I've read every piece of documentation the company has, and I've also just worked there long enough that I know the building the way you know your own house. Every sound it makes, every draft, every light that flickers before it actually goes out. 28 years. I started there when I was 24, right out of a 2-year technical program. Took a floor position because the pay was better than anything else in the county and I had rent to cover and a truck payment that wasn't going to wait. I moved up slowly. Floor worker, equipment tech, floor supervisor, eventually night shift supervisor about 12 years ago. Night shift runs 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 6 workers plus me. We handle the overnight pulping cycle, monitor the drying drums, do the equipment checks on the calendar schedule, handle any minor jams or calibration issues that come up, and basically just keep everything running so the day shift can come in and actually produce. I love night shift. I know that sounds strange to some people, but there's something genuinely peaceful about working when the rest of the world isn't. The town goes quiet, the road outside the mill goes quiet, and inside it's just you and your crew and the machinery. And the machinery has its own rhythm that you stop hearing after a while. It becomes like background, like white noise, and you move through it and you just exist in this big, loud, quiet space for 8 hours. I've done it so many times I could walk the entire facility in the dark. I know exactly how many steps from the floor entrance to the control board. I know which door sticks in winter because the frame swells. I know every imperfection. Routine is everything in that job. I'm not a spontaneous person by nature anyway. My wife will absolutely confirm that. She's been trying to get me to be more flexible for 19 years of marriage. But at the mill, my attachment to routine has a real practical purpose. You miss a check, something breaks. You skip a log entry, you lose your liability coverage. You do things in the right order at the right time and everything stays fine. I have run the same basic circuit through that facility almost every night for 12 years and I take genuine comfort in it. Or I did. I should mention, just because it's been on my mind and connected to everything in a way I can't quite explain. A few weeks before this happened, I'd been dealing with a billing dispute with our health insurance that was taking up an enormous amount of mental energy. Stupid thing to mention, but I want to be upfront about my mental state going in. I wasn't sleeping great. I was spending time on hold with the insurance company almost every afternoon, getting transferred around, losing track of what I'd already explained to who. It was the kind of low-grade grinding stress that doesn't feel like much individually but sort of stacks up in the background. I bring this up because when I started looking for explanations later, I wanted to account for everything honestly, including my own state of mind. The night in question was a Tuesday in late February. Vernonia in February is cold and wet, specifically the kind of wet where it's not quite raining but everything is saturated. The air just hangs with moisture and you can taste it. Temperature was probably 38 degrees. I drove in on Highway 47 the way I always do, pulled into the employee lot at 9:47 p.m. Same as usual. My 2019 Tacoma was the 4th vehicle in the row, same as usual. I went through the front entrance, signed in on the digital kiosk. We'd updated to a digital clock-in system about 8 months prior, so instead of physical time cards, we were using a badge tap system that logged entry location and timestamp to a central database. And I went to the supervisor's office to get my clipboard and review the day shift handoff notes. 6 workers on the schedule that night. I knew all of them. Curtis, who'd been there almost as long as me and had the kind of dry humor that only lands every third joke, but when it lands, it really lands. Maria, who ran the drying drum checks and knew that equipment better than the manufacturer did. Teo, who was relatively new, maybe 14 months in, still learning the routing but reliable. Phil, Danny, and Roz, all mid-tenure, all good at their jobs. I watched them come in, each one tapping their badge, each one showing up in my daily log confirmation on the supervisor's tablet. 6 workers, me as supervisor. 7 people total in the building at 10 p.m. when I did my opening count. The first few hours were completely normal. Routine right down to the specific order I do things in. I check the pulping floor first, then work my way through the north corridor to the drying building, then back through the main floor to the control room for the midnight log entry, then out to the northeast corridor for the equipment inspection loop, then break room for coffee at 1 a.m., then back to the floor. I've done this so many times that my body almost does it without conscious direction. Like muscle memory for a building. It was around 12:45, I think maybe a little before. I was finishing up the control room log and getting ready to head into the northeast corridor when I noticed the first thing. I was pulling up the badge tap log on the tablet to confirm everyone's last check location, which I do routinely to make sure nobody's been stuck dealing with a jam somewhere without calling it in. And I saw that my badge had registered a tap in the northeast corridor equipment room at 12:31 a.m. I hadn't been in the northeast corridor yet. I was standing in the control room. The northeast corridor was my next stop. I hadn't gone yet. I stood there looking at that entry for probably 30 seconds. 12:31 a.m., northeast corridor equipment room, badge tap logged. My badge number, I looked at the system clock on the tablet.
12:43 Uhr nachts.
I was in the control room at 12:43 a.m., and apparently my badge had been in the northeast corridor at 12:31 a.m. My first thought was a system glitch. The new badge system had had a few weird hiccups in its first couple months. Logged duplicate entries, occasionally showed a location wrong, and IT had pushed a patch for most of it, but not everything was perfect. I made a note in my clipboard to report it and moved on, because I had a schedule to keep and one weird log entry wasn't worth breaking my routine over. I went through the northeast corridor at my normal time, did the equipment checks, everything was fine. Machinery running within parameters. No yams. I noted the readings, moved on. But here's the thing. When I got to the northeast corridor equipment room, the specific room where my badge had supposedly tapped at 12:31, the wall-mounted log sheet had an entry on it. Those are the physical paper backup logs we keep on the equipment room walls, old habit from before the digital system. Supervisors still fill them in as a secondary record. The entry was dated correctly, time noted as 12:31 a.m., and it had the standard readings filled in pressure, temp, cycle count, in handwriting that looked like mine. Not close to mine, like mine. Same way I write the number 7 with the crossbar through it. Same way I sometimes write the R in the word pressure, where the second leg kind of curves out. I stood there in that equipment room for a lot longer than 30 seconds this time. It wasn't my entry. I hadn't written it, but it was written in my handwriting with my numbers and my notation style and my date format and the exact readings that the equipment was, in fact, currently showing, which meant whoever wrote it had either taken accurate readings at 12:31 a.m. or had written down the right numbers by some other means. I checked the rest of the corridor log sheets. They were normal, just that one room had the extra entry. I took a photo of it on my phone. I still have it, I've looked at it probably 100 times, and I went to get my 1 a.m. coffee. The break room is in the main building, off the east side of the production floor. It's a utilitarian space, round table for chairs, a counter with the coffee machine, a mini fridge, and a corkboard on the wall that has safety bulletins and emergency contacts and a few other random things that accumulate in break rooms, you know how it goes. I've been in that room thousands of times. I poured my coffee. I turned around to sit down, and I looked at the corkboard. There's a photograph on that corkboard that I genuinely could not tell you how long had been there. That's the honest answer. It was one of those things where the corkboard is so familiar that you stop actually seeing it, you just see the general shape of it and your brain files it as corkboard normal. The photograph was pinned in the lower left corner, kind of half behind a laminated safety sheet, and I could only see part of it. It was an old photograph, the kind with the slightly faded color palette of late 80s film processing, showing a group of mill workers in what I recognized as the North Corridor, posing for what looked like a company photo. Work gear, safety vests, the particular fluorescent quality of light in that building. There were maybe 15 people in the photo. I was looking at it because the man standing second from the left was, and I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't want to overstate it, was not someone I recognized exactly, but was wearing an expression that made me stop. Flat, forward-looking, not smiling like the others. Just watching the camera. I almost moved on. I was going to move on. But something about the photo made me lean in closer, and I saw the little white caption strip along the bottom edge. Weyerhaeuser Mill, Vernonia. Safety Day, 1987. I would have been 14 years old. This was 38 years ago. I went back to work. I had a schedule. At 2:15 a.m. I did my second pass through the north production floor, and this is where I noticed the second thing, or really where I noticed it consciously even though part of me had registered it and set it aside at some point before. The security kiosk at the north entrance, the one where the badge tap log displays in real time for anyone passing through, it shows a running tally of how many workers are currently inside the building. Standard safety feature, head count is always visible. I glance at it every time I pass, habit. It's always said 7. Me plus 6 crew. Said 8. I stopped. I looked at it. 8 workers currently badged inside the building. Now, this could mean any number of mundane things. It could have meant someone from day shift had come back for something they forgot and badged in without telling me. It could have meant the system was counting a badge tap incorrectly. It could have meant another supervisor had come in early for some reason. I ran through all of those possibilities in about 10 seconds, and then I got on my radio and called Curtis, who was on the floor. Hey, you see anyone come in? Any extras tonight? And Curtis came back after a second and said, yeah, actually, he thought there was somebody from maintenance he didn't recognize who'd come through around 2 a.m. Curtis assumed I'd approved it and hadn't mentioned it. I had not approved it. I had no maintenance work scheduled. I pulled up the badge tap log on my tablet, and there it was. At 2:03 a.m., badge entry logged at the north door. The badge ID number wasn't one I recognized from our crew roster. I copied it down and typed it into the personnel database, which should have shown me a name and a current employee record. What came back was a name and a record, but the record had a status field that said inactive, terminated April 1989, and below that, in the notes field, which usually just has administrative stuff, someone had typed see historical personnel file. I'm looking at my clipboard notes from that night as I typed this. I wrote the name down, then I circled it twice, and then I drew a line under it and wrote check photo and underlined that too, which tells me that at some point between seeing the name and writing it down, I'd already made the connection to the break room photograph. I don't remember making that connection consciously. I just remember looking at my clipboard and seeing check photo in my own handwriting. The man in the 1987 photograph. Second from the left. The one not smiling. The name matched. I want to stop here and say that I'm aware of how this sounds. I've been a practical person my entire adult life. I believe in equipment failures and system glitches and human error and the way stress does things to pattern recognition. I've never been someone who goes looking for explanations outside of those categories. And I want to be very honest with you. I still don't know what this was. I looked into something called pattern imposition afterward. It's related to a broader cognitive phenomenon where the brain under stress begins fabricating connections between unrelated pieces of information, essentially confabulating a narrative from noise. I read several articles about it. I even talked to a doctor friend of my wife's who explained how memory contamination works, how you can convince yourself you're recognizing a face you've actually never seen. All of that is real. All of that is documented. It doesn't fully account for what I found next. I decided at that point at roughly 2:40 a.m. to do an unscheduled walk through the building and physically locate every worker. Just head count, basic confirmation. I radioed the crew one by one. Curtis on the floor, confirmed. Maria in the drying building, confirmed. Teo, Phil, Danny, Raz, all confirmed, all in their expected locations. 6 people, radios working, voices normal. I didn't radio the 8th. I don't know exactly why. I think some part of me didn't want to. I walked the floor. I walked the north corridor. I walked the drying building connection. I walked the northeast corridor. I didn't find anyone who shouldn't have been there. I didn't see anyone unusual. I didn't hear anything beyond the normal sounds of the machinery and the building settling in the cold. The rain had started somewhere around midnight, Real Vernonia February rain, and you can hear it on the roof of the main building if you're in the right spot, just this constant low drumming, and that was there, and the machinery was there, and the fluorescents were doing their usual thing where a few of them go slightly amber before the shift replacement crew gets to them. I went to the supervisor's office to write up an incident note. The security log showing a badge entry for a terminated employee was a legitimate system issue that needed to be documented regardless of anything else, and I wanted to get it down on paper while I had all the details fresh. There was already a form on my desk. Completed incident report form. On my desk, on top of my clipboard, in the specific spot where I always set finished paperwork. I want to be precise about this because precision matters to me. It was form #SR14, which is the standard incident report form we use. It was dated. The date at the top was not that night's date. It was 3 days forward. It was dated for the following Friday, and it was filled out, completely. My name at the top, printed in handwriting that, again, I would not have been able to distinguish from my own without being told to look for differences. It described the night's events. The badge log entry at 12:31 a.m. for the northeast corridor. The photograph. The personnel database record. The 8th badge tap at 2:03 a.m. It described the walks I'd taken. It described my radio checks with the crew. It was accurate to every detail I'd experienced. My hands were, I'm trying to think of the right way to describe this, they went very still. Not shaking, not cold, just completely still in a way that felt external, like my body had just decided to stop taking requests for a moment. I've been in situations at the mill over the years that were genuinely alarming, equipment failures that could have been serious, and in those moments I go into a very functional mode and I handle things. This was different. This was my body deciding without consulting me that we were going to just stop and process for a second. I read the report, every line. It was accurate. It used my phrasing, my abbreviations. I always write NORR. For Northeast Corridor, and whoever filled this out wrote NORR. It had my format for listing badge ID numbers. I got to the last section, the supervisor resolution notes field at the bottom. This is where I would normally write my assessment and close out the report. It was partially filled in. The sentence stopped mid-word. The pen was on the desk beside the form. A black Bic ballpoint, which is what I always use. I keep 4 of them in my desk drawer because I go through them fast. The cap was off. It was sitting right beside the form at an angle that suggested it had just been set down. I picked up the pen. I sat there for a while. I don't know exactly how long. The rain was still going on the roof. And I became aware, in the way you become aware of something that's been true for a while but that you've been carefully not acknowledging, that I couldn't hear the machinery. The mill runs continuously on night shift. The pulping system, the drying drums, the conveyors, they have individual maintenance pauses, but nothing goes completely silent. And when partial shutdowns happen, there are alarm protocols and my radio lights up. There are layers of noise in that building at all times. Some of it so constant and foundational that you don't register it consciously. Same as how you stop hearing traffic noise after a while if you live near a highway. But you would notice if traffic stopped. You would notice the absence. The machinery had been silent. I couldn't tell you when it stopped. At some point in the last 2 hours, maybe more, it had gone quiet and I had not noticed, and I had no alert on my radio and no alarm had sounded. And sitting there in the supervisor's office with the pen in my hand, I noticed the absence the way you'd notice sudden total silence in a house where you'd forgotten the furnace was running. I looked up from the report. The supervisor's office has a window. It faces out onto the south end of the main production floor. It's an elevated interior window, so you can see the floor from up high, monitors the whole space. And at the far end of the production floor, maybe 80 feet away, standing completely still in the direction of the North Corridor entrance, was a figure. I couldn't tell you much about it. It was standing at the limit of what the floor lights reached, in a spot where 2 of the overhead fluorescents were out. The ones I'd mentally noted 2 weeks ago needed replacement. And the light at that end of the floor was insufficient and wrong. It was the shape of a person. It was standing still in a way that felt very intentional. Not paused, not stopping, still. The way something is still when it has been still for a long time and intends to remain so. I watched it for what was probably 30 seconds, although it registered as much longer. It didn't move. I looked down at the form, at the incomplete sentence, at the pen in my hand. I've thought about this moment more than any other moment in the last several weeks. I've tried to understand why I did what I did. I think, and I don't have a better explanation than this, I think I did it because I am a person who finishes things. I've logged incident reports for 12 years and I've never submitted an incomplete one. My entire professional identity is organized around doing the job correctly and completely and in the right order. And there was an incomplete incident report in front of me and a pen in my hand, and some part of my brain just followed the groove. Muscle memory. Routine. I finished the sentence. I wrote the rest of the resolution notes. I closed out the report, signed it, and put it in the completed file tray the way I always do. I don't know what I wrote. I've thought about this constantly and I genuinely don't know. It felt automatic. It felt the way driving a familiar route feels when you arrive and realize you weren't really consciously operating the car for the last 10 minutes. My hand moved, the pen moved, and then I was putting the pen down and the report was done. I looked back up at the window. The end of the floor was empty. I radioed Curtis. I told him to get everyone together on the main floor. I was calling an early break. He sounded confused, but he said okay. I walked out of the supervisor's office, down the floor stairs, and I stood with my 6 workers in the middle of the production floor and drank the rest of my coffee, and we talked about nothing. The Blazers, some road construction on 47. Roz was having her kitchen redone and she had opinions about countertop materials that she was happy to share at 3 a.m. I let the conversation go for 20 minutes and I looked at the production floor the whole time. The machinery started up again at some point during that break. I couldn't tell you exactly when because the startup is gradual, and by the time I consciously noticed it was running, it was already fully running, as if it had always been running, as if the silence had been the anomaly. No alarms. No system alerts. My radio stayed quiet. We finished the shift. I did the remaining equipment checks. I wrote the shift closing log. At 5:50 a.m., I did my final walkthrough and counted 6 workers and myself, and the kiosk said 7, and I stood in front of that kiosk for probably a full minute just looking at the number 7. The day shift supervisor, Karen, came in at 6:05 a.m. I handed off the clipboard. I told her she needed to have IT look at the badge log. There'd been a false entry overnight. I'd filed an incident report. She said okay, she'd put in a ticket. Normal handoff, same as always. I walked out, badged out at the north door the way I always do, and drove home on 47 with the heat on high because February mornings in the Coast Range are brutal. I went to sleep. I woke up at 2 p.m. My wife made lunch, and then Karen called me at 4 p.m. And she sounded strange, not upset exactly, more like carefully neutral, the way someone sounds when they're trying to figure out how to say something. She said she'd pulled the incident report I mentioned, the one I'd filed in the completed tray. I asked if there was a problem with it. She said the report was complete, and it looked like my paperwork, but it was dated for Friday, 3 days from then. She said she wasn't sure what to do with a report dated 3 days in the future, and she wanted to check whether it was a clerical mistake. I told her it was fine. I told her to just correct the date to that morning and file it. She said okay, and we hung up. She called back in 10 minutes. She said the report was no longer in the completed tray. She said she'd gone to pull it and correct the date, and it was gone. She'd checked the whole office, checked whether it had been filed elsewhere, checked whether someone had moved it. Nothing. Karen has been with the company for 11 years. She is not a dramatic person, but she sounded on that second call like she was trying very hard to keep her voice level. I went back in the next day on my day off and pulled the badge log myself. The entry for the 8th worker at 2:03 a.m. was there in the system exactly as I'd noted it. The badge ID, the timestamp, the north door entry, and the exit time listed, because the kiosk logs both entries and exits, was 5:49 a.m., 1 minute before I'd done my final walkthrough and seen 7 on the board. I pulled the personnel file number and submitted a records request for the historical file. Came back 2 weeks later. I have it on my desk right now. It's a paper file, the old kind, manila folder with typed forms from before digital records. There's a photograph in it, stapled to the inside cover. The same man. The safety day photo from 1987 was a copy. This is the employee file original. Same face, same flat expression, same forward look at whoever's holding the camera. The file notes that he worked the mill for 6 years. Night shift. He died in April of 1989, on a Tuesday. It was a Tuesday when I did my shift. His job title, listed on the employment history page, was Night Shift Floor Supervisor. I've looked into the confabulation research more since then. I've read about a specific phenomenon called cryptomnesia, which is basically when the brain stores information it encountered without properly tagging where it came from, so you can remember something, a face, a name, a detail, and experience it as entirely new information, not recognizing that you've actually encountered it somewhere before. The idea being that maybe I'd seen that photograph before without consciously registering it, filed the image away, and then found it later with my brain presenting it as a discovery. Maybe I'd seen his name somewhere in the old records, had absorbed it without knowing. Maybe all the connections I was drawing were my own brain's stored material, not external events. Maybe that explains the photograph. Maybe that explains the name. It doesn't explain the handwriting. It doesn't explain the stopped machinery. It doesn't explain why the kiosk at the end of my final walkthrough said 7 and not 8, 1 minute after the exit timestamp. I'm on leave right now because my wife asked me to take it, and because I have unused days, and because I thought maybe some distance would help me get my head sorted. I've talked to 3 different people about this. 2 of them have given me rational explanations. One of them just sat with me for a while and didn't say anything, and I think that was actually the most helpful response. I don't know what was in that building with us. I don't know what moved through my route that night, tapping my badge ID in my equipment rooms, writing my numbers in my handwriting. I don't know what filled out that report. I don't know what I wrote when I finished it. I know that for 28 years I did the same job in the same building and I thought I knew every inch of it. I thought familiarity was safety. I thought doing things the right way in the right order at the right time was a kind of protection. I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I'll go back. I know I'll go back. The mill is the mill and Vernonia is Vernonia and the mortgage doesn't care about any of this. But I've been thinking a lot lately about the difference between comfort and exposure. About how a routine that you do long enough stops being your routine and becomes something else, something external. Like a path worn into wood. Like a groove something else can follow. I'm gonna try to sleep. I have the file on my desk and I should probably put it away first. The photograph on the inside cover is face up and I've been aware of it the whole time I've been typing this, that flat forward expression, that not looking at something just past the camera. I'm gonna close the file now. I work nights at the Fast Lane Mardoff Highway 285 near Vaughn, New Mexico. Population 446 if you count the Petersons' new baby. I'm Priya Anand, 29, and I've been doing this shift 4 nights a week for almost 2 years now while I finish my anthropology thesis at UNM. The commute is terrible, but the pay is better than anything in Albuquerque, and honestly, I need the silence. Nobody bothers you at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. My manager, Frank, only cares that the register balances and the coolers stay stocked. The job is mindless, which is exactly what I need after spending all day reading field reports from the 1920s written by anthropologists who thought they were so much smarter than the people they were studying. My thesis is about cross-cultural folklore, and I'm about 4 months behind on it, and my advisor, Dr. Steinberg, keeps sending these really passive-aggressive emails about my funding situation for next semester. But that's not what this is about. October 23rd was a Wednesday. I remember because Wednesdays are always dead. Even deader than usual, and I'd been planning to use the downtime to work on Chapter 3. I got to the store at 10:45 p.m. for the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Frank left about 10 minutes after I arrived, same as always. He did his little walkthrough, reminded me the Pepsi delivery was coming Thursday, and took off in his truck. The store sits at this junction where Highway 285 meets County Road 3. During the day, you get ranchers, truckers passing through, tourists who took a wrong turn trying to get to Roswell. At night, you get maybe 5 customers total if you're lucky. Mostly it's just the fluorescent lights humming and the coolers clicking on and off and the occasional semi blowing past on the highway. I don't mind it. I actually like being alone. The first few hours were completely normal. Around midnight, a trucker came in for coffee and energy drinks. At 1:30 a.m., one of the ranch hands from the Morrison property stopped by for cigarettes and we chatted for a few minutes about how cold it was getting. He said they might get an early frost, then nothing for a while. I spent the time reading this really dense paper about threshold deities in pre-colonial Philippine mythology. It was for the comparative chapter of my thesis where I'm trying to show how 12 completely different ancient cultures all developed similar folklore about beings that exist at boundaries. Doorways, crossroads, dawn and dusk, shorelines, places that are between other places. Around 3 a.m., I did the bathroom check and restocked the coffee station. My phone was at 67% battery and I had a text from my roommate asking if I could cover her portion of the electric bill until Friday. I said yes, even though I'm already stretched thin. She forgets I see her DoorDash orders every single night. At 3:47 a.m., exactly the door chimed. I looked up from my laptop and there was a customer standing just inside the entrance. The reason I know the exact time is because I glanced at the register clock out of habit. We're supposed to greet customers within 5 seconds of the chime. It's one of Frank's things. So I said my usual welcome in, and the customer nodded and walked toward the back of the store. I went back to my paper, but I was also watching them in that way you do when you work alone at night. Just awareness. They went down the aisle with bread and dry goods. Here's where it gets weird, or where I started noticing it was weird. The customer was wearing clothes that seemed off. Not old-fashioned exactly, but not quite right. A long coat that didn't fit the shape correctly and shoes I couldn't really focus on. I remember thinking they looked like they'd walked a long distance, but I hadn't seen a car pull up. Usually I hear every vehicle because it's so quiet out there. They spent maybe 3 minutes in the aisles. I couldn't see them directly from where the register sits, but I could track their movement through the security monitor we have behind the counter. The monitor splits into 4 camera views: entrance, register, back aisles, coolers. Except when I glanced at it, the back aisle camera showed empty shelves and floor. I did that thing where you look away and look back. Still empty on the monitor, but I could physically hear someone moving around in that aisle. The faint sound of items being picked up, the rustle of packaging. My hands went completely numb for a second, like the circulation just stopped. I stood up and leaned over the counter to look directly down the aisle with my actual eyes. The customer was there, solid and real, holding items. I looked back at the monitor. Empty aisle. The customer came to the register. I still couldn't quite see their face, even though they were right in front of me under the fluorescent lights. Not like it was blurred exactly, but my eyes kept wanting to look somewhere else. They placed 3 items on the counter in a very careful arrangement. 1 package of Parle-G biscuits, the Indian brand we special order and barely anyone buys. 1 small jar of Vicks VapoRub. 1 Hershey's chocolate bar with almonds. I forgot how to breathe for a moment. Those were the exact 3 items my mother bought every single week from this exact store before she died 14 months ago. She lived in Vaughan for 6 years before the cancer. She loved those specific things. Said the biscuits reminded her of Chennai and the VapoRub was the only kind that worked and the chocolate was her one American indulgence. I never told anyone about that. It wasn't some widely known thing. After she died, I stopped ordering the Parle-G for a while because it hurt to see them, but then I started again because it felt wrong not to. We sell maybe 1 package every 2 months. The customer was looking at me. I think they were looking at me. I couldn't meet their eyes. I scanned the items. My hands were shaking, but I was moving on autopilot. The register beeped for each one. 1247, I said. My voice sounded far away. The customer placed exact change on the counter. Coins and bills. I counted it automatically and it was right. I hit the button to complete the transaction and the receipt printer started buzzing. When I looked up to hand them the receipt, they were already gone. The door hadn't chimed. I would have heard it, but the store was empty. I stood there holding the receipt for probably 2 full minutes. The fluorescent lights were buzzing louder than usual, or maybe I was just noticing it. I walked around the counter and checked every aisle. Nobody. The door was closed. I pushed it open and stepped outside into the cold October air. The parking lot was empty. No cars except mine. The highway was completely dark in both directions. No taillights, no headlights, nothing. I could see probably a mile in each direction because there's nothing out there to block the view. I went back inside and locked the door behind me, even though we're supposed to stay unlocked 24/7. Frank could write me up later. I didn't care. I pulled up the security footage on the monitor. We have a basic digital system that records everything and keeps it for 30 days. I rewound to 3:45 a.m. and watched. On the footage, I can see myself at the register working on my laptop. At 3:47 a.m., according to the timestamp, I look up suddenly. I say something, "Welcome in," I guess, though there's no audio. Then I'm watching something. My head tracks movement, but the entrance camera shows no one entering. The aisle cameras show no one walking around. The register camera shows me scanning 3 items at 3:51 a.m. 3 items that appear on the counter with no one placing them there. I'm scanning air, except the items are clearly moving. The scanner is beeping. I can see the little red light. On the monitor you can see the Parle-G package, the VapoRub, the chocolate bar. But no customer. I'm talking to no one. I'm taking money from no one. I'm holding out a receipt to empty air. Then I walk around the counter and check the aisles and go outside. All exactly as I remember it. But on the footage, I'm alone the entire time. I checked the register transaction log. At 3:51 a.m., there's a sale for exactly 3 items totaling $12.47. But the transaction ID shows it was processed using employee discount card number 3. That's my card. I never touched it. I found the receipt in the trash next to the register where I must have dropped it. I smoothed it out on the counter. Everything looked normal, the 3 items listed, the timestamp, the total. But at the top where it prints the loyalty card information, it showed my own name. Priya Anand. Employee discount applied, 10%. I turned it over. On the back, in handwriting I recognized immediately, were 9 words. Close the store early next Wednesday and go home. That was my mother's handwriting. The way she made her capital C's, the specific slant, the little loop on her W's. I have her shopping lists and birthday cards in a box at my apartment. It was exactly her writing. I sat down on the floor behind the counter. Just sat there. The lights kept buzzing and the coolers kept clicking and a truck passed by on the highway and everything was normal and nothing was normal. I didn't tell Frank. When he came in at 7 a.m., I told him I wasn't feeling well and left early. I drove back to my apartment in Albuquerque going about 80 the whole way and I don't remember most of the drive. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking I should call someone, but who do you call? What would I even say? Instead, I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I researched. The thing is, my thesis is specifically about this. Not this exactly, but I'm writing about what I've been calling threshold beings in my paper. Entities that appear in the folklore of cultures that had zero contact with each other but describe essentially the same thing. Ancient Greek psychopomps at crossroads. Hindu deities of doorways and beginnings. West African spirits that exist at boundaries between the living and dead. Pre-Columbian Mesoamerican gods of dawn and dusk, cave mouths and shorelines. Celtic folklore about beings that appear at thresholds during liminal times. 12 different cultural traditions spanning 4,000 years and 6 continents, all describing beings that exist at transition points. All saying these beings sometimes interact with humans during in-between times for reasons that are never fully clear. And all of them, in every tradition, describing the same 3 characteristics. They cannot be properly perceived directly. Witnesses describe difficulty focusing on them or remembering their features. They sometimes appear as deceased loved ones or wearing familiar forms. They leave offerings or messages that serve as warnings. The offerings are always in sets of 3. I found my research notes from 8 months ago when I was doing the comparative analysis. I had a whole section on the 3 gifts motif. In every culture, the threshold beings present 3 objects that have specific meaning to the person receiving them. Usually the objects relate to memory or loss. The person receiving them has to make a choice, though the choice is never clearly explained in the folklore. I pulled up my draft chapter. On page 47 I'd written, "The consistency of the 3 offering pattern suggests a fundamental symbolic structure related to decision-making at critical junctures. The recipient must interpret the meaning without guidance, suggesting these encounters function as tests of awareness or intuition." I'd written that 8 months ago. Academic analysis, theoretical framework. Now I had a receipt with my mother's handwriting telling me to close early next Wednesday. I didn't go back to work for 3 days. I called in sick, which I never do. Frank sounded annoyed but didn't push it. I stayed in my apartment reading every source I'd compiled for my thesis. Dr. Steinberg sent another email about my funding meeting on November 15th. I didn't respond. On Sunday, I drove back to Vaughan in daylight. The store looked completely normal. Just a flat-roofed building with gas pumps and a faded Fast Lane Mart sign. I went inside and Frank was working the day shift. He asked if I was feeling better. I said yes. I checked the security footage storage. Still there. I watched it again in the back office while Frank covered the register. Same thing. Empty store, me serving no one, items moving by themselves. Frank knocked and asked what I was reviewing. I said I thought I'd messed up a transaction on Wednesday and wanted to check. He said the drawer balanced fine and not to worry about it. That night I went back to work, the Sunday night shift. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Nothing unusual happened. 2 customers the whole night, both totally normal. I kept watching the clock. When it hit 3:47 a.m., I held my breath but nothing happened. Monday night, same thing. Normal, quiet, empty. Tuesday night, I brought my thesis notes with me and spent the shift reading them. I've been working on this research for 3 years. I've read hundreds of historical accounts and anthropological reports. I thought I was studying mythology, dead beliefs from dead cultures. There's a thing called the observer effect in psychology where the act of studying something changes it, or changes you. makes you aware of patterns you wouldn't notice otherwise. What if writing this thesis made me visible somehow? Like by cataloging all these accounts and identifying the patterns, I'd marked myself as someone who would recognize one of these threshold beings if I saw it. What if it came specifically because I would know what it was? On Wednesday afternoon before my shift, I sat in my apartment looking at the receipt. My mother's handwriting. I have a folder on my laptop with scans of her documents from when I was sorting her affairs after she died. I compared them. It was perfect. Not similar, not close. Identical. The exact pressure and spacing and letter formation. My mother died on December 2nd last year. Pancreatic cancer, very fast. We had 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. She was at the hospital in Santa Fe. I was with her. She didn't leave any mysterious final messages. We said our goodbyes. It was sad and normal and real. This wasn't her. But something had written in her handwriting telling me to close the store early tonight. I drove to Vaughn for my Wednesday night shift. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. My roommate was at her boyfriend's place. I left at 10:15 p.m. and got there at 10:55 p.m. Frank did the handoff. Everything normal. He mentioned the Pepsi delivery had come late. I nodded and barely heard him. After he left, I checked the door locks, the security cameras, the register. Everything was fine. I made coffee and pretended I was going to work on my thesis, but I just stared at my laptop screen. At midnight, a customer came in for gas and snacks. Normal. At 2:13 a.m., someone came in asking for directions to Roswell. I sent them east on 285. Normal. At 3:30 a.m., I was watching the clock. I could close early. I have keys. I have the authority if there's an emergency. I could lock up right now and drive home and never know what I was avoiding. Or I could stay and see what happens at 3:47 a.m. In my thesis research, there's an account from a Navajo anthropologist named Thomas Begay who interviewed his grandmother in 1934. She described seeing what she called a boundary walker at dawn near a river crossing. It appeared as her dead husband and told her not to cross the river that day. She listened. Later that day, a flash flood came through that canyon and would have caught her at the crossing. But there's another account from Ireland, 1890s, documented by a visiting folklorist. A woman saw what she believed was a fetch, a kind of double or death omen, that told her to stay home from the market. She listened. Nothing happened. But her daughter went to the market instead and was killed in a cart accident. The warnings don't always mean what you think they mean. And some of the accounts say that seeing these beings at all means you're already at the threshold, already at the decision point. Leaving doesn't change it, it just makes the choice for you. It's 3:42 a.m. now, and I'm writing this on my phone in the Notes app because I need to document it while it's happening. The store is empty. The lights are buzzing. There's a semi-truck stopped at the gas pumps outside, but the driver is staying in their cab. My phone is at 34% battery. In my thesis outline, I have a section I haven't written yet about why these beings show up. Every culture has a different explanation. Messages from the divine, tests of wisdom, death omens, guardians, tricksters. But there's one commonality in the academic analysis. These entities appear at decision points. Moments when a person is standing at a threshold, literal or metaphorical, and about to cross it. The being's appearance doesn't create the threshold. It marks that the person is already there. What threshold am I standing at? It's 3:45 a.m. I'm not closing early. I'm staying. I don't know if that's the right choice, but it's the choice I'm making. The thing about studying anthropology is you learn that humans have always lived with uncertainty. Every culture develops frameworks to deal with the unexplainable. Rituals, stories, beliefs, ways to feel like we have some control or at least some understanding. But sometimes you don't get understanding. Sometimes you just get a message in your dead mother's handwriting and a choice about whether to listen. It's 3:46 a.m. The door just chimed. I'm looking at the entrance and there's someone standing just inside. They're wearing the same coat as before, I think. It's hard to focus on them. They're moving toward the back aisles. I just checked the security monitor. The back aisle camera shows empty shelves. I can hear them moving around. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I should ring up their items when they come to the counter or refuse or run out the door. I don't know if this is really happening or if I've been having some kind of break from stress and thesis pressure and grief I never properly processed. But I'm gonna post this just in case. It's 3:48 a.m. They're coming to the register now. They're placing 3 items on the counter. Not the same items as last week. A small notebook with a blue cover, the kind my mother used for her shopping lists. A silver pen, looks like the one I lost last month. And a printed copy of my thesis outline, the exact document from my laptop. I can see my notes in the margins in my own handwriting. I'm going to scan these items. I'm going to see what the receipt says this time. If you're reading this, it means I posted it. I set it to auto-post at 4:15 a.m. using a scheduler app. I don't know what I'll do after that or if I'll delete this later or what. Next Wednesday is October 30th. The store will either be closed early or it won't. I already know which one it'll be. I've spent 3 years studying people who stood at thresholds and had to make choices with incomplete information. Now I'm one of them. The customer is waiting. I'm hitting the scan button.